I got an email from a girl who said that she had a mimic in her house that used to whisper things before they happened, and then it terrorized her. We're going to call this girl Caitlin for the story. So Caitlin and her family had just moved into a new house. Now, rumor had it from some people that she had talked to around the area that there was a mimic in that house and that it used to whisper things before it happened to the previous tenants. Now, Caitlin didn't really believe this until this night. So one night she's home alone with her siblings while her mom is out. Caitlin's just chilling at her house when suddenly she gets this really terrifying feeling, like there's something wrong before anything had happened. She's just trying to ignore it, right? So she's just sitting in her room, she's on her phone, when suddenly she hears something. She hears something right behind her door say, "One of you is going missing tonight." Caitlin said when she heard this, she froze. She doesn't really know what to do at this point. She's absolutely terrified and she doesn't want that to happen again. So under her breath, she just says, "Stop it." And after she says this, she just sits there for a second. She can't move. She has no idea what to do when she hears it again, except for this time it says, "Don't tell anyone. I will know if you try." At this point, her chest just tightens, and all she can think about is that she just wants this to stop. And as she's sitting there thinking about that, she hears her little brother. He was calling her name from downstairs, but something sounded wrong. His voice was too perfect. It was too calm. She has a good feeling that this isn't her brother, but out of curiosity, she gets up and she goes and she slightly opens the door, and then bzzz, her phone just goes off. It was a text message from him, and all he said was, "Are you upstairs?" And her stomach just dropped because she had just heard his voice come from downstairs. She's just standing there, terrified, when before she can even reply, she hears, "Caitlin, hurry up!" in her brother's voice right outside her door. So she starts backing away from the door and she is absolutely shaking, trying to think of anything that could make this stop, but she couldn't think of anything. Suddenly she hears this shriek come from downstairs. It's a scream coming from her sister, but it screams and then it abruptly stops. So it's kind of like, ah! She runs to the edge of the stairs because she's worried that maybe something happened to her sister, or she doesn't really understand what the hell is going on in her house. But as soon as she gets to the steps, darkness, no sound, nothing. And she hears it. Her sister's voice softly saying, "Caitlin, come downstairs, we need help." She said she knew it wasn't her sister. She knew that that was not her voice. As she's sitting there thinking this, she hears bzzz. Her phone startles her, and she looks down and she sees it's a text from her brother. And her brother says, "I'm in hiding. Do not come downstairs. There is something else here with us." So he's hearing all of this too. At this point, Caitlin's hands are shaking. She slowly starts stepping back, and that's when she sees it for the first time. There is a shadow at the end of the stairs, bending in a way like it didn't fit in the house. Then it started speaking. "Caitlin, Caitlin, Caitlin," switching from different family members' voices, first her sister's, then her mom's, then her brother's. And it's doing this as it takes one step closer to her, another step closer to her. Just Caitlin, Caitlin, Caitlin. She books it into her room and slams the door. She's just in her room covering her ears, again, trying to think of a way to make this stop, when she just hears the footsteps get closer and closer and heavier as it's repeatedly saying her name in different family members' voices, until it finally stops right outside her door, and then there's silence, but only for a moment, because a couple seconds later, in her own voice, she hears, "Open the door, Caitlin," in this ungodly whisper, and then everything went completely quiet. The next morning, her mom gets home and just like everything was normal, came up to her and goes, "Hey, did you hear anything last night?" She asked this question for two reasons. One, her little brother never came out of hiding, so he was hiding that whole time. And I'm assuming that her mother found her little brother in hiding, and her little brother told her mom what happened, and so she was coming to her to corroborate his story. But the second reason she asked is because her sister never came home. Do you remember what that thing whispered to her at the very beginning of the story? It said, "Someone is going to go missing tonight." And her sister never came home. Now, what I do want to say is that Caitlin did not elaborate any further on whether her sister ever did come home, or whether something happened to her sister, or if she spoke to her little brother. I did email Caitlin back. That's not her real name, but I did email her back, and you would think that I would remember to ask her that very important detail, the most important detail of the story, but I did not remember because my brain is scrambled. So Caitlin, if you are watching this, please email me back and tell me if your sister's okay, because that's insane. But what the hell do you guys think happened here? Do you think that this was a mimic? Because she did see it. It was a black figure, so we don't know if it had a face or not. And I do know that a lot of times mimics aren't supposed to have faces. I don't know. I also know that demons can also mimic voices, so maybe it was that. But whatever it was terrifying. And what was the scariest part to you guys? Because the scariest part to me by far was this thing coming up the stairs and switching voices into different family members' voices. Can you imagine that? I want you to sit back and imagine that for a second. You're seeing this thing super tall, bending in different ways, walking up your stairs, getting closer to you, and it's changing voices of your family members calling your name. Imagine it changing voices over and over and over again as it's coming towards you. Oh, that was one of the crazier mimic stories I've ever gotten, if not the craziest. I just got one that was really crazy recently, excuse me, but this one was pretty wild. That was pretty elaborate. A lot of stuff happened there. She saw it. She heard it several different times. It did several different things. It took several different, forms of, I guess not forms like physically, but auditorily. Drop all your thoughts, opinions, suggestions down in the comments. I promise I will reply to them. I'm going to reply to them tomorrow. I'm going through all my comments tomorrow. That is the day I chose. And let me know what you thought. But please, as always, be respectful. Thank you. Now I'm going to do my favorite part, which is the shout outs. My first shout out is going to, and I love this name, Who Cares, Damn It. That's a great name. I love it. Thank you so much for the comment that you left. That was such a nice comment. That really made my day. It was such a nice thing to say. And thank you for paying so much attention to my page, because if you know that I am in recovery, then you pay attention to my page. You've watched a lot of my videos, and I cannot tell you how much that means to me. It really means the whole world to me to have that type of unwavering support. So thank you so much. Thank you for liking my stories. Thank you for supporting me. Thank you for commenting and pushing them out and being kind. Thank you for being a part of my community. I really love that you are here, and I hope that you stay, and I hope you know how much I appreciate you as an individual. I love you. Jamie McMillan, thank you so much for the comment that you left. You are the sweetest. I'm so glad that you like my stories so much and you like the way that I tell them. I think I do tell them a little bit differently than other creators tell them. Sometimes I act out certain things because I have a very creative mind. Not creative. I don't know how to put it. I don't know if creative is the right word. I like to use creativity in my stories, and I used to do jump scares, and I noticed that people didn't like them, and I also got in trouble for them. So I stopped doing them. So it's my way of expressing myself. So I like the sound effects and me mimicking certain things in the story. So I'm glad that some of you like that. It really means a lot to me. So thank you for telling me that. I don't know if that's what you like about it or not, but regardless, thank you, because you like my stories. Thank you for watching them. Thank you for supporting me. Thank you for being a part of my community and being kind and leaving comments and pushing my video out. I hope you know how much I truly appreciate you as an individual, and I'm so glad that you're here. I love you, girl. And with that being said, my name is Kaisa, and I tell your paranormal experiences on here, or ones that you recommend to me 5 times a week. I gotta stop saying every night because it's 5 times a week. So if you're into that, hit that follow button, and I just need you to do 3 things for me. And what are those? Keep sending me your scary stories. Have a safe night. And what's the third one? Say it with me. Have a spooky night. Love you guys so much, my spooky babies. I'll see you in the next one. Spooky kisses and haunted hugs.
Welcome back to another episode of Tea After Midnight. Just a little series where we have some tea to keep it nice and classy, but I also tell you scary stories. Tonight's story is very scary, so with that being said, grab your favorite tea and settle in, and let me tell you a scary story. I am absolutely obsessed with this tea. This is the Benner tea that you can get from Aldi. It's the green tea in the flavor pomegranate. Easily has become my favorite tea. This story comes from Carrie. My name is Carrie, and I have a few spooky stories that happened to me and several friends/family members when I was a teenager. These probably won't be as spooky as plenty of the ones you've gotten before, but they are pretty crazy. It's not just one thing that happened, but several different things that happened from the time I was around 16 until I was in my early 20s. I lived in Mississippi most of my life, raised there, and moved to Tennessee in 2021. The town I lived in was so small you would miss it if you blinked. It was a fairly rural place, and where my house was, we were surrounded by trees and woods. There was a creek that ran next to my house, and my siblings and I used to play in that creek all the time, and we would always find arrowheads and things like that. Fast forward to when I was around 16. I'm now 32. A few friends, my boyfriend at the time, and I decided it would be a fun idea to play with a Ouija board in my home. Not a fun idea. For weeks after that, I always felt like there was someone or something standing in the corner of my room watching me at night as I slept. I distinctly remember one night trying to go to sleep, and just as I was about to doze off, I heard my name being whispered. I was in that state of half asleep, half awake, so I just thought I was hearing things until I heard it again. As soon as I heard it again, I yelled out, "Leave me alone and let me sleep." I didn't hear it again after that. Fast forward again a few years later. 2 friends of mine were at my house. I'll explain the layout of my house so you can get an idea of where we all were at the time of the occurrence. We had 2 double-wide trailers hooked together to make a T formation, and when you walked in my front door, you were walking into the living room, and my bedroom was off to the left. You would then walk into a dining room area with the laundry room off to the left, and to the right you would go around a corner into my kitchen. Right past the kitchen was a den area that my mother had walled in and made into a closet, and to the right was a spare bedroom and a spare bathroom. Keep going down the small hallway and through a door, that's where you would enter my mother's house, into the laundry room, which opened up into the kitchen and living area. Her bedroom was off to the left, and another bedroom and bathroom off to the right of the kitchen, and her office to the left. On the night in question, I was in my mom's office on her computer, downloading music on If You Know, You Know. One of my friends was in the living room and the other end of the house, and the other friend was in my bedroom with the door closed. As I was downloading music, I remember downloading one song, and when I played it played back really distorted. If you're familiar with back then, that wouldn't have been strange because some of the songs were just corrupted and would play wrong and you would move on to the next one. The strange thing was, normally, if a song was corrupt, it would play wrong every time. But when I played the song back again, it played perfectly fine. For some reason, this didn't set right with me, and I got the horrible sense of dread that washed over me that I couldn't explain. Something told me I needed to stop what I was doing and go check on my 2 friends, and most importantly, get out of that room. As I got back into my side of the house and made it to my first friend, his face was pale white and was curled up on the couch, looking clearly shaken up. When I asked him what happened, he said he was playing on his laptop and heard my dog outside start barking uncontrollably. Then he heard what sounded like something large, like the size of a car, slam into the side of the house, and even felt the house shake. I didn't feel any of this in the room I was in, and I will also preface this by saying the dog never barked at anything, ever. Even when other animals came into the yard, she never barked at anyone or anything. But as I was talking to him, I could hear her going absolutely crazy. When I looked outside, she was facing my front door at the bottom of my steps, still barking, but there was absolutely nothing out there that could have made that noise he described. Right around the same time we were looking outside, my other friend came out of my bedroom, visibly shaken. When we asked him what happened, he just shook his head and just kept repeating, "We need to go," and wouldn't tell us what happened. I still to this day have no idea what he saw or heard. I also want to add that at this time I had a piano with a mirror attached to it in my living room against the front wall right next to my front door. So the piano and mirror were facing my dining area and entrance to my laundry room. As we were all standing there trying to figure out what was going on, I was standing facing this piano with the dining area at my back, and both of my friends were facing me. I looked up into the mirror of this piano, and I very clearly saw something run out of my laundry room into my kitchen area. It was like a black shadow. I immediately looked through the little window that was open from my living room into the kitchen, and I saw nothing. The next day I'm telling my mom what we saw and experienced, and she said around the same time all of that was happening to us, she woke up because she felt something staring at her. And when she opened her eyes, she saw a woman in all white with glowing white eyes, hovering parallel to her right over her, probably an inch from her face. She said she closed her eyes quickly for a few seconds, and when she opened them, it was gone. She also had several instances throughout my childhood where she would hear something meow in her room shortly after she had put one of her cats down. And there were several occasions where she said my dad would be gone out of town and she would feel someone get into bed with her or sit on the edge of her bed. She continued to experience this even after they had divorced and he moved out. Several years after all of this happened, my brother, not biologically, just a close friend I grew up with, moved in with us. He told me of several times that he would go into the kitchen at night and would see things move out of the corner of his eye. He also said that he would be there alone and would sometimes hear someone walk through my living room, and he would go to check to see if I was home, but no one would be there. He said at one point he leaned over to look through the window in my kitchen that led into my dining room, and he felt a breath on the back of his neck. I'm just going to say that I think something came through that Ouija board, which is absolutely terrifying to think about, but honestly what I'm most scared about is that all three of them in that house that night had a separate encounter. Carrie heard something whisper her name several times, the other friend heard something slam into the side of the house, and then the other friend is too terrified to even tell anybody what they saw. That's actually so terrifying. But then Carrie also sees a black shadow in the mirror's reflection. But then years later, her brother comes to live with them, and then he feels something breathe on the back of his neck. If that were me, I'd be packed up and moved out that night. No. I am so scared. Like, when I hear stories of something physically touching you that you can't see, or breathing on you, or whispering a name, no. Cut the cameras, we're done, pack it up, we're gone. But Carrie, thank you so much for sending in your story, but we would love to hear any other experiences that you've had or any updates on this. But that does conclude this episode of Tea After Midnight. If you have any personal scary stories you want to share, I would love to hear them. They can be about any scary story that you've experienced. You can email me at the email on the screen or the email that's going to be in the caption of this video. But as always, you guys, I love you so much, and thank you so much for watching. I hope you have the best night, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!
Let's read some Reddit stories about haunted Airbnbs. Stayed at an Airbnb in Salem, Massachusetts on Essex Street. I will not disclose the address. Last night of our visit, I woke up at 3:20 a.m. Out of habit, I always check the time on my phone. I noticed the bathroom, hallway, and kitchen lights were all on. Both of my friends were giggling in the living room. I found this odd. We all went to bed after midnight. My first instinct was, are they investigating without me? I heard them both giggle again. I presumed they were doing fine without me, so I fell back asleep. It was around 8 a.m. or so. I was up in bed looking at my phone. One of my friends stepped into my bedroom and asked, "Did you hear anything last night?" I excitedly shared what I saw. Woke up at 3:20 a.m., lights all on, which I found super odd. Both were giggling. I assumed they were both investigating. I chose not to join in, and I fell back asleep. Her eyes grew wide, her face in shock. That's not what happened. Our other friend was harassed by the wife of the captain, likely first owners, in her sleep in the master bedroom. My other friend was sleeping on the couch. She heard mumbling from the master bedroom. She walked to the doorway of the master bedroom to see our other friend's legs straight out to the side, as if she was being pulled out of the bed. Our friend was screaming in her sleep. She immediately recited the Lord's Prayer. Our friend in bed shot up, awake, and gasped loudly. They both moved into the living room and sat in shock, quietly, on the couch for some time. They eventually fell asleep in the living room. They never turned on any of the lights. They never laughed. The Lady Spirit manipulated my environment to prevent me from helping. The Lady Spirit made it very clear we are not welcome. She also taught me that spirits can manipulate our environment or our minds to trick us. I have been to many haunted locations repeatedly with incredible experiences. However, this home was tops. I will never stay at this house again. I stayed in a haunted Airbnb in Grand Island, New York, just north of Buffalo, New York. It was a beautiful 2-story house with a wraparound porch built in 1905 on the Niagara River. I was staying there with my wife and her family for her grandmother's funeral, as most of her family lives in the Buffalo area. On our second day staying there, my wife and I are completely alone in the house, waiting for her cousin to come pick us up when we start hearing footsteps upstairs. I immediately recognize the noise as the sound of the footsteps from someone walking around, but my wife is initially trying to explain it away as old house noises. The footsteps continue with more purpose now, and they're gradually getting louder and more distinct to where my wife can't deny it anymore. I decide to get the balls to go upstairs to investigate and find absolutely nothing and no one. We both try to brush it off at this point when suddenly we hear what now sounds like somebody stomping around upstairs, followed by a door slam. Nope, we waited for her cousin outside after that. I had an experience at an Airbnb in Flagstaff, Arizona. It was just an average but nice house in a good neighborhood built in the 90s. The couple was so nice, and there was even a vibrating bed. I get clairvoyant images in my head at haunted places, and I got a flash of a woman at the door with red hair, but I just forgot about it. I dreamt that night of the woman, and she's talking about all the antiques in her room and how she made the quilt I was in. Real chatty, red hair, 1940s looking lady. Something about the trunk in there. I can't remember exactly the details now. At breakfast the next morning, I mentioned to the host that I dreamt about the room and a lady, and right away she says that's her dead grandma. We go into the room, and she pulls out photo albums, and it's, you guessed it, that same woman. She told me all about her. It was actually really sweet, and I felt comfortable enough to tell her what I had picked up on. And she believed me and told me that she had abilities too, which is why I think the whole thing happened in the first place. All three of us apparently have gifts with seeing the dead. The weird part, though, is I only bought the room because I had seen it before in an image in my head. So I knew something would happen in that house, and I was curious. I have this bizarre ability to know if a place is haunted just from looking at a picture. It never fails. I stayed at a castle/manor in France a decade or so ago with my girlfriend at the time. It was through this program, I want to say Workaway, where you can travel to different places and get hosted by people in exchange for work or help with their farm, business, hotel, whatever. One of the people we had met through the program had just purchased a castle in France. He needed someone to stay while a foreign crew came in and did renovations. The grounds consisted of a huge manor, a smaller guest house, some gardens, and a very, very old church. We started by staying in the guest house. Everything was fine during the day, but I would wake up at exactly the same time every night with this intense feeling of dread. I was absolutely certain that someone or something was about to walk into the room. I would wake up in a cold sweat, absolutely terrified. It didn't matter how much I drank or how much medication I took. Same time every single night. We eventually moved into the castle, thinking that would help. The exact same thing happened, wide awake at the same time, frozen in fear. I can remember thinking to myself, how am I going to react when this entity walks into this room? I never saw anything in the month that we stayed there. As soon as we left, I was back to normal. We even did some micro travels while we were at the castle. I would sleep perfectly fine anywhere, but on the grounds of that castle. I've actually never stayed in an Airbnb before. I always just get like a hotel. I never even think to get an Airbnb, but after reading some of these stories, I'm probably just gonna stick to hotels. Airbnbs are kind of scary because you don't know, like personally know the freaking owner. They could have cameras up, or they could be like hidden in the house somewhere. You never know. Let us know if you've ever had a creepy experience at an Airbnb.
So I used to clean houses that people wouldn't stay in anymore, and it wasn't like hoarder houses. It was worse. It was the kind of houses that were just left as is, like somebody left and never came back. So a small company would get contracts for abandoned properties, and we would go in, we would deep clean, stage the homes, and sell them like nothing ever happened. Most of the time, it was obvious why people would leave the house. Bad energy, mold, lots of damage. But there was one house we came across, and it was completely normal, like too normal. Everything was still there. Clothes were folded. There was a glass of water on the nightstand. Dishes were put away. It was like somebody paused midday and then never unpaused. So it was just my job to go in, clean it, and report if anything was off or unusual. And at first, nothing was until I made it to the hallway. There were photos that were lining the wall, and it was all of the same person. Different outfits, different places, but she was doing the same thing in all of them. She was staring directly at the camera, not smiling, just staring. I didn't think very much of it until I went to go and clean the bathroom, and I was wiping down the foggy streaks off the mirror, and I found that there was some writing underneath it. Not on top, but underneath, like it had been written a long time ago. And it said in all caps, "Don't let her see you see her." I stepped back really fast and I kind of just admired what I just looked at. I tried to just tell myself it was a prank, something funny, haha, something written a long time ago. I kept working, and then later on I went back into the hallway and I noticed something. The pictures in the hallway were totally different. Same woman, Same outfits, same places, all of that was the same except for one thing. She was not staring directly into the camera anymore. She was looking off to the side, like she was staring at something else, and I felt sick. I slowly turned to look at whatever her eyes were aiming at, and I looked back at her again, and then her eyes again were back at the camera, staring straight at me, and this time the pictures were different. They were closer, like it looked like it was zoomed in a little bit more. So I grabbed all of my things and I ran to the front door to leave. The handle was moving, but it was not opening. And then I heard something behind me, a little footstep in the carpet. And then I heard a little quiet whisper. I didn't turn around. I just sat there trying to breathe. And the whisper said, "Don't look unless you want to stay." Somehow I got the door open. Next thing you know, I'm outside. I ran. And about a week later, I got my final paycheck. But with that envelope of money, I also got a printed picture that I saw. And it was a picture of me. And the picture was me not looking at the camera, but I was sitting there at the front door looking back at her or whoever the voice was.
So I just saw this really creepy video.
Please, I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it.
And it really scared me because obviously the sound is terrifying, but also because it really makes me think of the disappearance of Laureen Ron. Laureen vanished from her apartment in 1980, but there are two things about her case that are incredibly disturbing. One is that when her mom came home that night, she found that all of the light bulbs in her apartment building's hallways had been unscrewed, so it was pitch black. And two, that for years after Laureen's disappearance, her family and friends would receive phone calls from an unidentified person, usually around 3:45 a.m. And this person would leave clues that suggested they were Laureen, possibly in need of help. So when I say that this is one of the creepiest missing person cases, I mean it. And since it's still unsolved, let's talk about it. This is Laureen Ron. She was only 14 years old when she disappeared in 1980. Laureen was born in 1966, and her parents divorced when she was just a baby. She was raised mainly by her mom, Judith, and they lived on the third floor in an apartment building in Manchester, New Hampshire. They were incredibly close, and Laureen was described as a really smart student, someone who was always happy, outgoing, and she loved to sing and dance. Her goal in life was to become an actress, but shortly before she disappeared, her family said that she started hanging out with some not so great influences. She started smoking weed and drinking alcohol, and on one occasion she mentioned running away. But this just seemed to be all talk. Outside of this, she was just your typical 14-year-old girl, but no one could have expected that soon their lives would forever change. On April 26, 1980, Laureen's mom Judith went out of town for the day for her boyfriend's tennis tournament. Laureen usually went with her, but this time she decided to just stay home and relax. She was on spring break, so she really just wanted to hang out with her friends, and that's exactly what she did. That day, Laureen was seen hanging around her neighborhood and going to a convenience store, nothing out of the ordinary. And during that entire day, a handful of family members stopped by their apartment to check on her and make sure she was okay, which she was. But then it gets dark, and this is when Laureen invites two of her friends over, a male and a female. They're her age too, and throughout the night, they all drink a 6-pack of beer and a bottle of wine together. It seemed like they were really having fun. That is until around 12:30 in the morning. All three of them were sitting in the living room when they started hearing voices coming from the apartment building's hallway. And Laureen's male friend, who has never been publicly identified, got really scared thinking it was Laureen's mom returning home. Since they were all drinking, he really didn't want to get in trouble, so he left through the apartment's back door. But he distinctly remembers hearing Laureen lock the door behind him. It turns out that the voices were not Laureen's mom. They actually didn't know who they belonged to, but it wasn't her. So eventually, after their male friend leaves, Laureen and her other friend, who was spending the night, crawled into Laureen's bed together and tried to fall asleep, but for some reason, Laureen couldn't. And the last thing that her friend remembers seeing was Laureen grab her pillow and blanket and head out to the living room to sleep on the couch. Little did she know, but this would be the last time that she ever saw Laureen again. Fast forward to around 1:30 in the morning. This is when her mom Judith and her boyfriend return back to the apartment, but immediately they feel the hairs on the back of their neck stand up. And this was for a good reason. So they lived on the third floor, but as they were walking up each flight of stairs, they noticed something super creepy. All of the light bulbs on each floor of the apartment building had been completely unscrewed, so it was pitch black. They weren't off or out, they were unscrewed. But they continue anyway, and as Judith gets to her front door, she notices that it's unlocked, which is also odd. So she starts walking through the house and she peeks into Laureen's room, and of course it's dark because all the lights are off since it's so late? She sees a figure sleeping in her daughter's bed, so she assumes it's Loreen, because why wouldn't it be? Well, then Judith's boyfriend notices something strange once again. The back door to their apartment is wide open, so Judith goes in to wake Loreen up and ask her why she left it open. But as she does, she realizes that it's not Loreen sleeping in the bed, it's her friend. And Loreen is nowhere to be found. Judith tries asking her what happened, but her friend admits to drinking a lot of alcohol and not really remembering much. So Judith tries not to panic, and she starts calling all of her family members nearby to see if Loreen is with them, which she isn't. This is when she and her boyfriend head outside and start scouring the neighborhood, but it's like Loreen vanished into thin air. Finally, at around 3:45 a.m., Judith spots a police car parked on the street and flags him down to report her daughter missing. So police briefly investigate, but they don't really take the case seriously at first for at least the first few weeks because they think Loreen just ran away and would be back. There were no signs of a struggle or forced entry at the apartment, but what was weird is that all of Loreen's personal belongings were left behind. So her clothes, purse, money, her brand new shoes that she never left home without, a recent birthday present, literally everything. It was all left in the living room as if time was frozen still. But as the weeks turned into months and Loreen never returned home, police started to change their theory. They thought that maybe she left home at some point after her friend went to sleep to go and get something, fully intending to come back, and then maybe someone kidnapped her or she was met with foul play before she made it back home. They kind of glossed over all of the light bulbs being unscrewed in the building, which to me is honestly really scary and kind of feels connected. Then an employee from a local bus company came forward and told police that he sold a ticket to a young girl who really resembled Loreen the day she disappeared. So they interviewed all of the bus drivers that day, and one of them specifically identified Loreen from an old photo of her. And he said that he dropped her off in Park Square, Boston that night. So this felt like a good start. But then police showed him a more recent photo of Loreen, and then he kind of backtracked, and he said that he could no longer be sure that that was Loreen or not, which is frustrating. Police tried tracking down this lead, but sadly they had no luck finding anything. This is when Loreen's case started to fall cold. That is until October of 1980, 6 months later. This is when Loreen's mom discovered that she had been charged for 3 phone calls that were placed in California. Now, Judith didn't know anyone in California or had any ties there, so this really caught her interest. So she turned this information over to police, who found that the calls came from 3 motels in Santa Monica and Santa Ana. The 3rd phone call was from the Santa Ana motel, and investigators found that that motel and phone number was from a teens sexual assistance hotline that was run by a plastic surgeon. So this seemed like it could be a really good lead. So investigators tracked down this plastic surgeon and briefed him on Loreen's disappearance and how someone from that hotline called Judith, her mom. But the plastic surgeon denied knowing anything about that phone call or Loreen's disappearance. But a few years later, an investigator with Wings for Children, which is an organization for mental health services, they began looking into Loreen's case. This investigator actually tracked this plastic surgeon down to ask him some more questions, and this time he completely changed his story. This time he said that when he was running this hotline, a lot of young girls would visit his wife at their home for additional help, and that one of the girls may have been Loreen. Why he never told police this back when she first disappeared, I have no idea. But then he said he knew of a corn actress who may have information about Loreen's disappearance, which is also really random. Police were able to track down this corn star, but there was no link between her and Loreen, so this was another dead end. But what's really odd is that police learned that one of the motels that called Judith after Loreen disappeared could have possibly been a filming location for CP. And it was reported that this was set up by a CP producer named Dr. Z. Unfortunately, police were not able to locate this Dr. Z person to see if Loreen was possibly one of his victims. And they also weren't able to link him to the teen sexual assault hotline either. To me, this seems really weird that all of this was taking place at a couple of motels in California. And the plastic surgeon seems really suspicious to me too, but that's just my opinion. I don't know why he wouldn't have told police all of this from the get-go. So we don't really know if these motels / the hotline calls were just a red herring, or if they really did have something to do with Loreen's disappearance. But these mysterious phone calls to Judith would continue for the next several years, and she would usually get them around 3:45 in the morning. She would get more of them around Christmas time, and during the calls, the caller never uttered a single word. She got them so much that she ended up having to change her phone number years later, but she always believed that Loreen was the one calling her. Why she never said anything on these phone calls, she doesn't know. And what's even scarier scarier is that even Lorraine's aunt received some of these phone calls, except with her, the caller would speak. It was always a young girl asking for Mike, which is Lorraine's cousin. But every single time that she would put Mike on the phone, the girl was silent. She also believed that this had to have been Lorraine because she was the only one who ever called her cousin Mike. His full name was Michael, and no one else was allowed to shorten it to Mike except for Lorraine. So again, this is really weird and creepy. And if that wasn't enough, one of Lorraine's childhood friends named Roger even got some phone calls too. This was in 1985, so a few years later, and the caller was a woman who claimed to be Lori. Roger's mom picked up the phone one time, and she said that the woman claimed to be one of Roger's former girlfriends. And interestingly enough, Roger and Lorraine dated each other when they were 12 years old. Over the next few years after Lorraine disappeared, there were two possible sightings of her. One was by a family friend who thought they saw Lorraine at a bus terminal in Boston. This was never confirmed though. And another person thought they saw a sex worker in Anchorage, Alaska who really resembled Lorraine, but police were never able to track her down. And although we don't know what exactly happened to Lorraine or why, there are a handful of other cases that could possibly be connected to hers. The first is the disappearance of 15-year-old Rachel Garden. Rachel went missing 1 month before Lorraine when she stepped outside to buy some groceries at Rose Corner Market in Newton, New Hampshire. She was never seen again, and although police don't fully believe these two cases are connected, Lorraine and Rachel did look similar, were around the same age, and disappeared not far from each other. Then, 6 weeks after Lorraine disappeared, 25-year-old Denise Denault vanished after leaving a bar in Manchester. Her body has never been found, but decades after her disappearance, police named this man as a person of interest. His name is Terry Rasmussen, and he was a serial killer in the area. He went by the fake name of Bob Evans, and he killed his wife in 2003. Terry died in 2010. The crazy part is that he lived literally 1 mile away from Lorraine when she disappeared. It's suspected that he could be involved in at least 6 other murders/disappearances, including the Bear Brooks murders. Between 1985 and 2000, 4 women were found murdered in Bear Brook State Park, and one of the victims was Terry's biological daughter, so it seems like he could be responsible here. I know Denise and Lorraine have a pretty big age gap, but they looked really similar, so police believe that they could possibly be connected. Another case possibly connected is the disappearance of 15-year-old Shirley McBride. Shirley was last seen leaving her sister's apartment in Concord, New Hampshire. It was around 9:30 p.m. on July 13th, 1984, and she's never been seen or heard from again. So these aren't 100% connected, but police believe that it's possible. The only thing they know for sure is that Lorraine was met with foul play at some point. Her male friend that was hanging out with her that night ended up taking his own life in 1985, which is sad. Some people think that he may have had something to do with it, but police never considered him a suspect. I don't know what to think here. Did someone she know take her? Who and why would anyone unscrew every single light bulb on all 3 floors of an apartment building? And was that connected to her disappearance? I mean, other neighbors reported hearing voices in the hallway that night around the same time as the kids did. And I think the biggest question I have is, was it really Lorraine making all of those phone calls? It's cases like these that truly disturb me because we may never know. But it's now been 46 years, and whatever really happened to Lorraine that night remains a mystery.
So I've had nightmares on multiple occasions with the story I'm going to tell you tonight. This is a personal experience that happened to both me and my best friend Eva. So with that being said, grab your favorite tea and settle in, and let me tell you a scary story, because of course, this is Tea After Midnight. But before we jump into tonight's story, I wanted to tell you about the tea I'm drinking. The owner of Haints and Hollers Apothecary reached out to me and she wanted to send me over some teas to sample. She's an herbalist and she mixes her own blends of tea, and I just have to say this is the first one I'm drinking, and this is so good. So the tea I'm drinking tonight is called Mimic in the Mist, and I just have to say, the name she comes up with, including the name of her company, is so cool. So if you're interested in different mixes and blends of loose leaf tea, I would highly recommend you check her out. I would highly suggest you check out Mimic in the Mist because this has easily become one of my favorite teas. But thank you so much to Sage for sending these teas over. I am absolutely loving them. You guys go over and show her a lot of love on her page. I'm going to tag her down in the caption below. Now for tonight's story. This story is a personal experience from both me and my best friend Eva. This happened when I was about 14. My best friend had come over to my house on New Year's Eve. This was the very first time she had ever spent the night with me. We did the normal things for New Year's Eve and watched the ball drop, but shortly after, my mom told us we needed to head to bed to go on to sleep. We fell asleep, but were only asleep for about 2 hours when I woke up and sat directly up in bed. When I look over at Eva, she was asleep, but then woke up and asked me if I called her name. I told her no, that I had just woken up, but didn't know why, and was going to try to go back to sleep. No more did I finish that sentence when we both hear what sounded like loud footsteps coming up the basement steps. Let me set the scene for the layout of my house. My parents' younger brother and my bedroom were on the left side of the house together, along with the hall and the bathroom. Going down the hall led you to the living room and kitchen/dining room, then past that was the basement steps and my older brother's room. So if we were on the left side of the house and can pinpoint where the sounds were coming from, then they had to be pretty loud. At first I just thought it was my dad or older brother going to get something down there, but I peeked out of my bedroom window and my older brother's car wasn't there. He went to spend the night with his girlfriend that night, so once I didn't see his car, I knew it wasn't him. I opened my bedroom door and went straight across the hall to my parents' room, and they were both sound asleep. So I dashed back across to my younger brother's room, and he was also asleep. Mind you, when I opened my bedroom door, the sound of the footsteps stopped immediately, so no one would have time to run back to their room once I opened the door. I went back to my dad and told him that I thought someone was in the basement, and he said he didn't hear anything and that it was probably an animal outside. Eva and I went down the hall to my older brother's room just to make sure he wasn't home and that I wasn't spiraling for no reason. His room was completely empty. And while I was on that side of the house, I checked the laundry to make sure no one had been washing shoes or something heavy. Both washer and dryer completely empty. The dishwasher was also completely empty as well. So once I had narrowed down that no one else was in the house, we ran right back to my bedroom, utterly terrified, and shut and locked the door, and hid under the covers of my bed. We sat there shaking because as soon as I closed my bedroom door, the footsteps started again. I forgot that I didn't check the bathroom, so I had to run back across the hall to my bathroom just to double check no one was in there, and surprise, no one was. I am terrified at this point, so I stayed huddled in the center of my bed with Eva, waiting for it to either stop or for whatever it was making that noise to get us. The footsteps continued and got louder and louder, and then it started to come down the hall that was next to my bedroom, and we heard what I can only describe as scratching on the walls and a guttural growl. I am in no way, shape, or form exaggerating this. It sounded like a beast or a demon was outside of my room, clawing and scratching, and it was the most terrifying thing we had ever heard. And mind you, when I asked everybody the next day if they heard it, they all said they didn't hear anything all night. This persisted for at least an hour, so we sat there shaking. We were both frozen in fear and couldn't move. It eventually did stop, and we had no idea what this thing could have been. Eva brought her iPod with her, so we decided to open the voice memo app and record for the rest of the night, just in case something decided to start again. Somehow we both fell asleep, and when I woke up, Eva was still asleep, and she woke up about 10 minutes after I did. She pressed stop on the recording, and we listened to a good bit of it, fast-forwarding through most of it, just to see if we had gotten anything. But when I tell you my heart stopped about 5 minutes before the end of the recording, before Eva woke up, something whispered her name into the iPod. I kid you not. Mind you, I was the only one in my room that was awake, and I heard nothing. We started to scream and ran in there to have my mom listen to it. Mom thought one of us had said it in there to be funny, but I promise you with everything in my being that neither of us did that. Once my mom had started listening to the recording, she went back to the beginning and started to go through it herself, and she was able to hear some of the stomping and scratching that we heard. And when it whispered my best friend's name, she believed us after that. Eva didn't come over for quite some time after that, in which I completely understand. My whole family had encountered something in that house at one time or another of us living there. But this encounter for me has remained the most terrifying paranormal experience I have ever been through. So that was our personal experience. Any thoughts? I do want to say that I've never seen a face to this presence, like I never saw the presence physically, but I have had several nightmares since that took place, and every time I dream about that house and the presence that was in it, it always comes with a face in my dream. And the closest thing that I can describe this thing as is the Babadook, but that is genuinely the closest thing that I can describe it as. And I literally have chills all over me right now just saying it. I was gonna say, do you care if I tag you in the video?
No, I don't care.
Okay. Is there anything you want to add? They can't see you, but they can hear you.
Which one? Which story are we talking about?
There has been multiple. But no, the one where we heard the stomping coming up the stairs and the scratching and the growling, and then it said your name in the iPod.
Yeah. Do you remember that time your dad called you into his room? You were still living in the room where Reed used to stay, beside the basement.
Okay, yes.
Okay. You remember how there's the door?
Yes.
Well, I remember I just stayed in there because your dad just wanted to talk to you for a minute. I think you were talking about groceries or something.
Yeah.
And we had just shut the door because I was like, I don't want the door open. I'm scared.
Right.
And I might be crazy, but I remember feeling like I started getting this feeling on the back of my neck.
Uh-huh.
Something's in this room with me. Alright?
Uh-huh.
And then I remember feeling and hearing the door knob jiggle.
No, you're lying.
No, I'm not lying. And so I remember just being terrified. And I remember not knowing what to do. You know that feeling when you're like stuck and like just pause?
Yes.
And you can't do anything?
Yeah.
You're like, if I move, something's going to attack me or something's going to go wrong.
Right.
I remember sitting there like praying, like, Savannah, come back, Savannah, come back, Savannah, come back.
Oh, buddy.
Yeah. And so I remember I took all my courage to like run and open the door and run that way because it was terrifying. That house was terrifying.
You hear it here first, right here. Is there anything that you want to add personally to the story?
Gosh. It was just real. Like, I've never had an encounter that real before. That surreal. Like, the scratching on the walls, the stomping on, going up the stairs, like, just the overall, like, how heavy that house was with whatever paranormal activity was in there was just insane.
Right.
I just remember waking up and wondering, is someone in the house who's not supposed to be in the house? And then finding out that it was paranormal and ghost activity. And I mean, I don't know. We thought they were going to believe us that we were hearing these things.
Yes.
So we just turned my iPod on to record it. And then, I mean, it was several hours of stuff. And we were asleep here snoring.
Yes.
And to hear it like go, or whatever, whisper it.
Ooh, I literally, I don't know if everybody can tell, but my neck, like, I am burning up. Like, this is like, yeah.
It's real stuff. I think about it sometimes and I get creeped out. I have
Well,
to, like, open.
Okay, so let me tell you this. I don't know if I don't know if I've ever told you this personally. I just told them, but I don't know if I told you this. So I never physically like saw the presence, and was able to put a face or a shadow to the presence that was in the home. I never saw anything like that. We heard stuff, of course, and Jaron and Reed have both seen. Jaron and Reed are my brothers, by the way. So both of my brothers have seen something, and they both saw different things, but they did see something. But I never saw anything, but I have had several dreams, like nightmares, about that house, and it puts, every time I dream about it, it puts a face to that presence. And the closest thing I can describe it as is the Babadook. I'm so serious. I'm so serious, bud. And I didn't even know how to pronounce it. And I looked it up on TikTok. Now I'm terrified. Genuinely. Because I'm serious. With the tall, the face, the teeth, the long fingers. And, ooh, okay, so here's a little treat for everybody. I'm going to set my cup down. She knows what I'm talking about. The basement. The half wall that was right there.
Yeah.
Okay. So in my dream, I'm standing in the kitchen. Okay. Kitchen, the dining room is right here, and then past that is the basement, right? The hallway that leads to the basement. You have to round a half wall that takes you down to the basement steps. So in my dream, I'm standing in the kitchen looking down that hallway. Yeah. And it's dark in there. Oh God, I'm getting... Okay, so I'm standing there and looking down this hallway, and on the half wall, all you can see is the face of the Babadook. All you can see is it peek out behind that wall. It's like this, and it peeks out behind the wall, and it takes its fingers and wraps it around the wall like that to peek out at me. I'm serious, bud. Like, and that's... and but then, so it does that thing, like the whole, like, peeks around, then it just flies at me. And then I wake up before it gets me, obviously, but it flies at me and it gets up in my face. And it's just terrifying. Like, it's just terrifying. So I just got off the phone with Eva, and she said that she's okay with me tagging her in this video. So if you guys have any questions or things that you want to ask about in the comments, you are more than welcome to, and we will both get to you as soon as we can. But that does conclude this episode of Tea After Midnight. If you have any personal, spooky, scary stories you want to share, I would love to read them, and they do not have to be about the Appalachian Mountains. You can send them to me at the email on the screen right here, or the email in the caption of this video. But as always, you guys, thank you so much for watching. I love you, and I hope you have the best night, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.
The story I'm about to read is terrifying and true. One night, my sister, my friend, and I decided to explore an abandoned farmhouse just outside the city limits. When we first arrived, it was still light out, and the house already looked unsettling. The paint was peeling, the windows were boarded up, and the yard was completely overgrown. We decided it would be much creepier to explore in the dark, so we drove a little farther down the road and parked on the side while we waited for the sun to set. While we waited, we started talking about paranormal experiences. My sister and my friend shared stories they had heard or things that they believed in, but I didn't take any of it seriously. To me, it was just stories meant to scare people. Eventually, the sun went down and everything around us became quiet. We drove back towards the house and parked our car off the road so no one would notice it. From there, we had about a 5-minute walk to the property. The only light we had came from our phone flashlights. A couple minutes into the walk, I started hearing noises somewhere in the distance. At first, I thought it was coyotes, which wouldn't have been unusual out there. But the more I listened, the more wrong it sounded. It sounded like a person screaming, but stretched out and distorted in a way that didn't feel human. I asked my friend if she heard it, and she laughed and said, "Relax, it's probably just a flesh pedestrian." She was clearly joking, but the sound made my stomach twist. Suddenly, the darkness around us felt heavier. By the time we reached the driveway of the house, my heart was pounding. It was completely pitch black, and our flashlights barely lit up the ground in front of us. Behind us stood an old crumbling barn, and beside it was another house that actually had a faint light on inside. Someone was living there, but we tried not to think about that. The abandoned house in front of us had every window boarded up, except for the garage entrance, where the door had fallen off. As soon as we stepped inside, our lights landed on something strange, a bike. It looked almost brand new. We nervously laughed and assumed maybe it had belonged to the people who used to live there. The weird thing was, the house still had everything inside. We slowly walked through the house. There were children's birthday cards all over the floor, family photos still hanging on the walls, and toys scattered across the floor. Normally, I find abandoned places interesting, but something about that house made me feel uneasy. I had a horrible feeling in my gut that told me we shouldn't be there. My sister, my friend, and I wandered into a smaller room that looked like it belonged to a kid. We could barely walk into the room due to toys, garbage, and random stuff scattered all over the floor. The light from our phones barely reached the walls. Then I pointed out that there was writing all over the walls. The word brat was written over and over across the walls in dark, messy writing. My eyes moved around the space until they landed on the closet. The door was slightly open, and inside was completely dark. Then I saw someone standing inside. It was a man, but something about him looked wrong. His skin was pale, and his hair hung in messy strands around his face. He looked dirty and almost inhuman. The worst part were his eyes. They were so dark, they barely reflected the light from my phone. For a second, we just stared at each other. Then I screamed. I ran out of the house as fast as I could. My sister and my friend ran right behind me. Upon exiting the house, we rapidly sprinted towards the car. As we ran, we passed the barn. The house behind it had a faint light glowing from the balcony. It appeared as if someone was watching us, but maybe I was paranoid. My sister started crying as we ran, and the 5-minute walk felt like it lasted forever. Just as we were approaching the car, headlights appeared behind us. A car was coming down the road and slowing down. We instinctively ran to the car and hid behind it. The car rolled closer until it finally stopped right near where we were hiding. None of us moved. None of us made a sound. I wanted to jump into the car and drive off, but I couldn't make my feet move. It felt like time completely stopped. As soon as the car sped off, we wasted no time getting in the car. My friend started the engine, and we sped off down the road. After driving for a while in complete silence, we decided to go home. To this day, I still think about it, and it haunts me. But it piqued my curiosity. Was it just a homeless person? Something more sinister? Was there a person on the balcony? And what freakish animal or human was making those noises? The person who sent this to me said that they still drive by that house sometimes, but they have not gone inside since. And I think that's for the best.
রুটি ঠান্ডা গেলা
রুটি ঠান্ডা
ঠান্ডা মানে আব্বা বরফের লাহান ঠান্ডা এটা রুটি
শ্বশুর আব্বা আপনারে আপ্যায়ন করে নাই খাতির যত্ন করে নাই
না আব্বা আমি
বিলাই মারার রাত আজকা আজকা যদি তুই ঠিক মতো দামকে দিবার মানুষ বাইরে গেছিস গা নাকি বললাম সারা
আর দোস্ত মাগো আছে ওগো খানদান আর আমাগো খানদান এক না অদ্ভুত কিছু নিয়ম কানুন পালন করতে যাইয়া তোমার বাড়ি
তুমি কইতেছোটা কি আমগোর খানদানের পোলাপাইন যদি একবার ঘর জামাই হয়ে যায় গা ওরা তোর খানদানে ফেরত যাবার পারে না
আমি আব্বা আমারে বুঝামু
কি বুঝাইবা তুমি
হয় নাই কা তুমি আমারে বুঝাইতে পারতা আমারে মারলা ওসব আমগো বংশে
আজকে এইসব হইতেছে আব্বা আমি কই যাবো আব্বা আপনি আমার প্যারা ড্যাডি আব্বা
তুই আমার দাঁড়াবি না দূরে থাক দূরে থাক
আমি খাটে ঘুমাইছিলাম আমার লাথি মেরে খাটে হালায় ভাইজান লেটে লেটে সারে ঘুমাইছে
হারামজাদা মিছে কথা কস্তুর
বউয়ের সেবা সুন্দর করে না করতে পারলে জামাই পিটানোর রেওয়াজও আছে আই তুমি কুস্তি পারো
না
ঠিক ভাইজান ভাবি ফালতু খানদানে কইলাম আজকে তো আপনার বাসু ভাই
ফাইনাল ডিসিশন লয়ে লইছি আজ
তুমি কিন্তু আমার একটা ভিডিও কলও করো না সোনিয়া অ্যাঞ্জেল সোনিয়া
তুমি কি শুরু করছো
আরে আমি করলাম ডাকি আমি যেন বয়ে আছি
এই আমার ফোন দাও দাও কইতাছি
ছাড়ুম না
কি দাও ছাড় কইতাছি আমার ফোন দিব না আমি
এইটা আমগো খানদানি রীতি তুই বুঝছ না
আব্বা গতকালকে রাত্রে বেলা এমন সেটিং দিছি
আব্বা ফোন দিয়ে কি করেন আপনি
এই কথা কই গান শুনি এই আর কি
বাস এই দুইটা কামের জন্য
হায় হায় করছে কি আমার খানদানের ইজ্জতের ফালুদা খেয়ালাইছে
তোবা তোবা কোস কি এত বড় বদ জামাই
হারামজাদা আমার মা
তুমি বাসে আসার পর থেকে আমাকে বাসে শান্তি সব চলে লাগেছে
আয় হায় খাইছে কুচুটা কি তুমি
তুমি একটা ভিডিও কল করে পাঠাও প্লিজ প্লিজ কবে আমগো দেখা
কোচিনটা কি এটা আব্বার লগে এমন চিপা মাইটা দিয়েছেন কেমন খানদান বউ
তারপর তো ভয় কাচে মুচু খায়া গেছে গা তারপর আবার দুর্নাম করতে হইব
যাইবেন এর লাগা চুপ আছিলাম কিন্তু অহনা চুপ থাকান যাইবো না
কিরে সাজান
আমরা মানি না আমগো খানদানে আমরা এক গ্লাস পানি পর্যন্ত ডাইলা না খাই
আমাগো খানদানে আছে
এই ভাবি একটা ফালতু খানদান থেকে আইছে এই সব খানদানের আমি ধারদারি না
চলো না আমরা বাড়িতে ফিরে যাই
তুমি কি পাগল হয়ে গেছো নি এইটাই আমার বাড়ি এখনতে
চৌধুরী সাহেবের সাথে আমি কি কথা কইছি তুমি কোনো কথাই কই নাই কা সাজান তোমারে কইলো এত
দিচ্ছেন হ্যাঁ দিচ্ছেন না এলা বাইরন আমার বাড়িতে বাইরন
একটা হাসা করছেন আব্বাজান আপনার পোলার এই বাড়ি থাকা কোনো বিতলামি করলে আমি তোরা ঘাড়াই কিন্তু ভাবলাম আপনাকে একমাত্র পোলা ঘাড়াইলে আবার দিলে চোট পাই
দিতাছো তুমি
শোনো তোমাগো খানদানে যেমন কিছু নিয়ম আছে আমাগো খানদানেও আছে
এই সব ফাত্রা নিয়ম কেউ যেন জানবার না পারে মনে থাকবো তো তোর যে নতুন ভাবি
হয়ে যাইবো
যা মন চায় তাই করো এই ফোন আমি দিব না কার লগে কথা কইতাছো হ্যাঁ
এই আমার ফোন দাও
আরে বাপ রে বাপ কইতেছো কি তুমি আমার খানদানি পোশাক আমি খুলে ফেলামু তুমি কি আমার অর্ডার করতেছো
শিউলিমালা যা কয় তাই অর্ডার
এসে আমি
বিস খাস বিস বিস কিনা লইছ
আমি অ্যাঞ্জেল সোনিয়ার লগে কথা কইলে তোমার সমস্যা কোথায়
আমার সমস্যা নাই কা
হার বাদে বউ আবার পানি লইছে সেই পানি বিদিছে ফালায়া এমতে করে বউয়ে বারবার পানি আনে আর জামাই বারবার পানি ফালায় দেয়
আরে হইতাছে মায়া গো আসল ঠিকানা
তোর বাপে ঠিকই কইছে
সাজা যদি আর একটা সপ্তাহ আমগুর বাইক থাকে।
এই খুশির খবরটা তো আমি আমার বাসায় দিয়ে দিচ্ছি। আমার আব্বা আপনারে ফোন দিয়ে কথা কইব।
হইছে তোমার এই বেটা এই তুই তো আমার মান ইজ্জত সব শেষ করে দিছ।
শুধু কি আপনার মান সম্মান আব্বা জান?
কি কইতাছো এগুলো তুমি? তুই কইতাছোটা কি? এখন সময় আছে, তোমার আমি স্বামী হিসেবে।
আমি তোমার লগে অনেক খারাপ আচরণ করছি, তুমি আমার কথা রাগ করো না, চলো না বাড়িতে ফিরে যাই।
আমি যে মারছি এটা যদি ব্যাপারতে জানে মান সম্মান কিছুই থাকবো না, মুখ দেখাবো কেমতে?
আপনাকে পুরো খানদানে মান সম্মান শেষ।